Welcome to the Hoard's Dairyman podcast, your source for trusted, science-based information you can use on your dairy. In today's episode, Associate Editor Jenna Byrne interviews Christine Leonard, founder of The Grater Good, a cheese and charcuterie business located on her family's dairy farm in Carver County, Minnesota. This episode is brought to you by the Hoard's Dairyman Farm Creamery. Hoard's Creamery crafts award-winning cheeses from legendary Guernsey milk at the historic Hoard's Dairyman Farm. From gold medal cheddar to world-class Gouda, every bite is rich with tradition and flavor. Discover more at hoardscreamery.com. Once discovered, never forgotten.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hoard's Dairyman podcast. Today we are so excited to have Christine Leonard here with us. She is from Minnesota and it's a pretty busy time of year for her. So thank you for being here, Christine.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited and humbled to be on here today, so I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, thanks. And we previously had you in our Hoard's Dairyman Roundtable, I believe sometime last January. And as we've been getting started on this podcast journey, we've been wanting to highlight some women that are really doing cool things in agriculture. So you instantly came to mind. If you guys haven't read our roundtable from last year, Christine specializes in charcuterie boards and cheese tastings and classes and things of that nature. So today we're kind of going to unpack that and what that all entails. So Christine, can you kind of tell our listeners how you got started in just dairy farming in general? Did you grow up in it, or how did that kind of look like?
Yeah, for sure. So I am the sixth generation actually farming here. So I grew up working with cows, whether that was through 4-H, dairy judging, dairy knowledge bowl. And I just really always loved my time on the farm and just a lot of great memories growing up here and stuff too. So yeah, that's really how I got my start in dairy farming, I guess. It's kind of in my blood. Kind of a funny story, though. I guess I'll just go right into it. When I went off to college and went to the University of Wisconsin-Stout in Menominee, Wisconsin, I really didn't think I was going to come home and farm, mostly because I didn't know how I was going to farm at the size and scale that I wanted to. I think the average herd size in Minnesota is about 230 milking cows. Average herd size nationwide is, I think, 350. And so I knew I wanted to farm at a smaller scale than that, so I wasn't sure how I was going to make that work. So I actually have a degree in food science and technology. I knew what those foods looked like on the raw side when they left the farm. I knew what they looked like on the finished side when you picked up a block of cheese or a gallon of milk or whatever it really is. And I wanted to know what happened in between there. About a year before I graduated college, though, that's when I really got bit by the farming bug. And I called my parents and I said, hey, I really want to come home and farm with you. And they said, no way, go do something else. They basically said, this is too much work for not enough money. Make sure you really want this lifestyle before you come home and farm. So luckily, I've made my way back here. And we'll probably get into that a little bit more later too, but it made me laugh listening to Krista talk about that as well, that her parents, she said the same thing when she, from last week's interview, was that when she kind of came home or that she never even thought about coming home to the farm, that there wasn't going to be space for her. And there's a lot of us out there, I think, that have that same echoing of, are you sure you really want to do this? This is a lot of work. So kind of interesting, I think, to talk about, how I'm able to make it work too.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, unfortunately, those conversations happen too often where maybe the child does want to go back to the farm, but they don't feel as if there's room or space, or think they would have to add on more cows and things like that. So I'm glad that you found your niche in the cheese kind of area of things. You had mentioned that your mom and dad said, go do something else before you come back. Can you kind of talk about that and what that looked like?
For sure. So, it kind of was a accumulation of things that had led me to ask them to come home anyway. I had been pretty involved in like the Dairy Princess program, and I'd done a national dairy judging trip and things like that. And it was really like, oh man, this is really an industry I want to be involved in. And so I think when I asked them, I was still riding the high of all of those really fun experiences. And they just, that was 2017, I believe, when I asked them. I'm pretty sure the statistic is 2018 is the year that Wisconsin lost, 700 dairy farms due to low milk prices. So they really just were worried, I think, about, how is that going to work. And so they knew that I'm also very extroverted, so like, go find a job where you can talk to people and things like that. But what I ended up doing was, that summer after they told me that, I really kind of did a lot of like, got my feet back in the ground on the I got my feet back, kind of in the dirt. Really, I ended up actually working at an organic vegetable farm that summer. I worked for a woman there who had started organically farming with horses in the middle of Wisconsin. And she was like, what is the reason that you couldn't come home and farm? Because I was still in the mindset, they're probably right. 45 cows is too little cows. And so about a year before I graduated college, and that was when I had asked my parents, like, hey, can I come home and farm with you? And I really, at that point in time, was really just thinking about, ways that we could make farming at a smaller scale work. And one of the things that I decided to do in between there was, I actually spent some time working on an organic vegetable farm that summer, kind of getting my hands back in the dirt, really remembering what it is that kind of hard work is. And the woman I worked for there, we're talking about women in farming. This is the year of the woman farmer. My boss, Kate, she had started farming organically with horses in the 1980s in, cropland, Wisconsin. People really thought she was kind of crazy. And talk about a great woman for me to go work for, someone that was her own boss, that paved her own path, and that really did a lot of awesome things. And so she was a great mentor. And one of her things was, well, why couldn't you farm? And that's kind of the point where I started thinking outside the box a little bit more than just coming home and just doing the standard thing like my parents and the generations before them had done anyway. And then after I graduated, I had December graduation date, and then I went and I worked up at Redhead Creamery, which is in central Minnesota, and they make farm-set artisan cheese. Elise is another huge mentor of mine, and somebody that knew she wanted to come home to the farm, wasn't sure how she knew she didn't want to milk cows, and so she ended up making farm-set artisan cheese, which means those animals are being milked right on site of that processing facility. At that point in time, I missed working with cows, so would take a few morning milking shifts. And in the morning, as you're milking, that milk was literally being gravity fed through a stainless steel pipeline, through a tunnel underground, directly into their pasteurizer tank. And when you finished your morning milking shift, you'd shower, change into your creamery clothes, and by 2 o'clock that afternoon, you were literally eating a cheese curd that you milked that morning. And that was kind of my first introduction to what artisan cheese could be in the first place. I had never really thought of farmstead production that way, and the magic that you can get from having that direct connection with the animals. And she was able to introduce me to a lot more cheesemakers too, that were doing things outside the box that were really pretty cool. So when my parents did let me come home, so I've been full-time farming with them since January of 2018. So we're almost to year 8. And I thought I was going to do on-farm production right away, but that just wasn't in the cards. And so that's kind of where my cheese board business kind of starts to fit in there. So
Nice. So as you came back and you're thinking about what can I add, I guess, as a niche market in addition to dairy farming, how did you said you wanted to start on-farm production, and it didn't necessarily go that route. So how did you bring up the idea of starting your cheese business to your parents and kind of getting them on board with it and other members of the business as well?
yeah. And so knowing that we were going to do some kind of a like niche agriculture, some kind of value added, was really what allowed me to be able to come home in the first place. I just sort of come to my parents with some kind of a plan, and we actually thought we were going to bottle milk right off the bat. But one of the best things, and something I would advise everybody to go do if you're thinking about doing something value added, is make sure you're talking to people that are currently doing that, asking them their opinions, asking them their struggles, and the biggest holdup for us was the cost of building the facility in the first place. But then at the end of the day, what it really came down to was a timing thing. Any dairy farmer knows you're spending 50, 60 hours on a good week in the barn, and that's not during harvest season. So my dad liked to point that out. So milking is one of my favorite things to do because it's one of our best times for visiting, for thinking, for brainstorming. And he sort of brought up All right, so you're going to spend all these hours in the barn, and then you're going to spend 30 hours plus a week in your processing facility bottling milk, and then you're going to go find time to go and market that and to sort of build your clientele, and you're going to try to be I was 24 and try to be 24 and have any kind of a social life. So he really was kind of a good point. We even had a milk inspector out to kind of start talking about what the process would look like, and we just really determined that it wasn't for right now. um, Around that same time, I had been building cheese boards. That was something I had done when I worked up at the creamery, and I'd bring them with to, different family and friend occasions, and I'd post them on Facebook or Instagram. And I had somebody message me around that same time, like, "Hey, can I buy a cheese board from you?" It's like, "Sure, I can sell you a cheese board." I think I made like $2 on that first board. I did not make a lot on it. But what it ended up doing was it kind of got the ball rolling on that. And my dad kind of was like, "Hey, why don't you look into see what it would take to do that a little bit more?" We started my business in 2019, mostly with just orders from family and friends. And then I found out that we needed a licensed commercial kitchen in order to be able to do that. And so we added that to our farm in 2020. And then 2020 obviously was a very interesting year, not a lot else going on. So it worked out good to put that building up that year. And people were looking for experiences to have in their homes. And so the kinds of cheeses that I was bringing in was really giving them something to think about, something to ruminate on, and it really gave them that farm to table aspect. They had to drive out to the farm to pick it up, I think, that they were looking for. Um, and since then, we've expanded into tasting classes, and we just opened up a little self-service micro cheese shop right on the farm, all with that goal of processing still in mind. So let's say 2020 was the year I started my business. That 2030 goal is really the year I'm hoping to be making cheese by then, to cut back a little bit on cow numbers and to really be able to make my own products.
Yeah, for sure. And it sounds like you have a lot coming down the pipeline for you, which is great. And as we're talking through this cheese business, I know you're saying classes, charcuterie boards, and things like that. There's so many different cheeses. I mean, I know I wouldn't even know where to begin as to pairings and things like that. How did you acquire that knowledge as to what goes with what and what actually tastes good to the consumer?
That's an awesome question. You're right. There are so many different kinds of cheese. And then when you get into it, even the one cheddar tastes different from another cheddar, which tastes different from another cheddar. I've done an entire class just on here's 6 different cheddars. None of them taste anything alike. And so, really, my mentors at Redhead, that was really where that started. One of the things that I also did while I worked there was a lot of in store demos. And so, I would go to these cheese store or to specialty grocery stores and work at the cheese counter. And I would get to work with these cheesemongers, the people behind the counter, that they were bringing in and trying all sorts of different stuff. And if they were cutting into a wheel of something, they'd be like, "Hey, try this," and really expanding my palate that way. So I'd go home and once you kind of develop a taste for it, it's kind of fun just to pick up a little wedge of something and, okay, we have to try this. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. Um, but as far as like the pairings and so continuing on with how I pick out even the cheeses that I'm getting to, a lot of them was word of mouth and who I could buy from. So when I first started my business, I would just buy directly from um, Redhead Creamery, and then I was like, "Hey, Elise, would you send me a list of all the Minnesota, cheesemakers?" So I emailed out from that list, and then I picked up a few more cheesemakers after that. And that just kept growing and growing and snowballing. And then I wanted to get into some Wisconsin cheesemakers that were doing some cool stuff as well. And that's when I got connected with a distributor that I work out with out of Minneapolis, just to get cheeses. Shipping is really expensive. But from there,
I can
sort of
imagine.
the cheese community is really cool in that there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of support. And once you get on the sort of the Instagram feeds or timelines or whatever, there's a lot of fun stuff that comes up. There's magazines and award shows and all that kind of stuff too, just to hear about what creameries are out there, what they're doing, how they're doing it, in that word of mouth really too. It's like, "Hey, have you ever tried this one? You really should." Um, and so that just kind of helps helped me kind of grow and continue to source from people that I couldn't find the cheeses locally. And so that was something that I wanted to bring in. So a lot more smaller producers with a little bit different kinds of stories to tell too. Oh, the pairing portion of that really is one of the places I started out with was just Googling it, like, what wine do you have with the cheddar, or what foods do you pair with the cheddar? And from there, that was a good starting spot. But then you have to just be curious. So I'd start to just try different stuff all the time. I just discovered one of my current favorite pairings last weekend just because I was thinking about, what else would be good with this Prairie Breeze cheddar. Usually I pair it with dried pineapple or something, sweeter. Sometimes I'll pair it with apples. And I knew I wanted to pair it with something chocolatey. And so I pulled out a Heath bar. And at a pairing class I did last week, it was this Prairie Breeze cheddar and a Heath bar. The nuttiness in there was awesome. And it brought out an entirely different side of that cheese. And so just kind of continuing to do those kind of wild, goofy pairings is always kind of fun too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many different routes you could go. There really is no limit as to what you pair things with. So I guess when you're having these cheese tastings, I think the hard part for me, the person that puts this together, every audience is so different. So how do you, I guess, fine tune the board to your consumer that you're dealing with, or is it just happens by chance?
For sure. So there's kind of two different routes. So for like the tasting classes in particular, those they get a flight of like six cheeses, like just like you would get a flight of wine or a flight of beer. And those I try to work a whole variety of tastes and textures. So that way, my goal with those classes is that you can take away from there. I loved how this cheese had this super creamy texture. It was real, or this one was really crumbly. This one had these little crystals in it. So that way, the next time you go to buy cheese, you can think about what attributes you liked from the cheeses that you tried and ask for those a little bit more in there as well. And then as far as the cheese boards go that I do, those ones, it's kind of whatever is in season, whatever I've decided to bring in. I try to hit a mix of something pretty like plain and simple. So a queso fresco, a Colby, a mild brick cheese, something just kind of basic that everybody 2 to 92 is probably going to like. And then I like to pull in something a little bit sharper, a little more aged, a little more crumbly, something that's just got a little bit bolder flavor in there that everybody's going to be a little bit excited to try. It might not be their favorite one, or it might be their absolute favorite. Then I usually do something flavored and something soft and creamy. So something to just hit on different flavor and texture notes. So that way there's a little bit of something for everybody on the board, and usually you're sharing it with the group, and it's kind of a fun way to get to try different stuff. I always put a little summary on the sheets too about this is a cheese, this is where it's from, who made it, what kind it is, and this is a little background on it, and this is what I think you should try it with. So when I put these boards together, I intentionally put the pairings next to it. So if this cheese is really good with fruit, I'll tuck fruit around it and make it look like a little fruit dip. So you're intuitively eating. If you grab a cranberry when you're having a piece of this cheese, that should be a nice pairing. Should be something pleasant. So, yeah, that's kind of the goal of it.
I guess there's definitely a lot more than I thought to putting together these charcuterie boards. And you had mentioned now you're ramping up here, I'm assuming, with like Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all the things. Um, and you had mentioned that you're pretty busy this time of year. So, what is the biggest things that you're busy with this time of year? Is it more so the boards, the cheese classes, both?
Yeah. Well, I think the first biggest thing is really the farm. Actually, that I'm the most busy with. So we're just getting into harvest season here too. We just finished our fourth cut of haylage. We're looking at doing corn silage here pretty soon, and we have a brand new manure pump going in. So all the exciting things that are happening on the farm,
Yay!
and my summer help, she just left to go to her first year of college to study dairy science. So we're a little short on help and a little full on activities. So that's the biggest thing. But I just finished up my summer market series. So I had gone to a bunch of markets, and I think I have like 14 events in the month of September, whether that's tasting classes or different on farm experiences that I've been invited to be a part of. And so I think the biggest thing really is just trying to balance all of those things together. I do all my prep work in the mornings before I go out to the barn. So whether that's prepping for a class or whether that's making any boards that were ordered. And then usually it's morning chores, and then whether there's other projects on the farm in the afternoon, or a lot of times that's been getting filled with getting ready for a class. Um, and our milking schedule we adjusted to 8 and 8, so that way I can go and teach a tasting class at 5:30 or 6 p.m. and be home for night milking by 8. So really that's just kind of the flow of things right now. I'm hoping to have about 10 less cows, which it's a good time to be selling cows, I guess, if that's what you're looking for. Um, but just trying to manage all those schedules and just really hone in on it so that I can be very present in all the things that I'm doing. I really love my job, both of my jobs. I love working with cheese and I love working with cows. And so just trying to find that balance and squeeze in all the fun things that pop up too. So
Well, it certainly sounds like all your days probably run together and you don't get a lot of rest, but it sounds like it's a very fulfilling job. Of course, we talked about it being busy with on the farm right now. Chopping corn silage is coming up, I'm sure, in your neck of the woods. Um, I guess, what does a typical day look like for you now that you're back on the farm and have this cheese business?
yeah, so if I have boards to make in the morning, I'm usually up around 5:30 or 6 out in my little I have a my kitchen is just right next to our house, so right on the farm. Um, Usually getting that done, try to be back out and in the barn by about 8 o'clock, milking our normal morning chores. So we milk in a tie stall barn. We have automatic takeoffs. We let our cows out for a few hours every day, and then they come back in. That usually runs till about 1 o'clock or so, depending on what broke. And so I'm sure all the farmers out there know that too, pretty well. And then usually in the afternoon, it's any more prep for the next day that I'm working on with cheese, get cleaned back up. So, like yesterday, I had a farmer's market and I needed to leave by about 3 o'clock with all the supplies for that. Do whatever kind of events those are, and then head back home. And night milking is at about 8. So, my dad. He told me he wasn't milking alone anymore. I didn't come home so that he could milk by himself. So he'll still help with chores. He's out there all the time still. But he'll feed and stuff for me. But then back in by about 9:30 or 10, depending on how many cows we have at that time and if there's any fresh cows. And yeah, just keep it rolling. So.
Dad's laying down the law, it sounds like, but I'm sure he's happy to have you back at home. What are your plans? You had mentioned, like, 2030 wise, you're still thinking in terms of processing cheese, making cheese. Um, so I'm assuming that's one of your long-term goals. What else does farming look like for you in the future? I mean, with the processing side, do you want to become a cheesemaker? Any goals for that too?
That's a really good question. So my really one of my goals is to have, I've been saying I've been wanting to milk about 30 cows for the last 4 years, I think. And so short-term goal is I'd like to get down to at least 10 less cows here. I'm kind of like I was saying, just to 10 less cows. We have 3 rows in our barn, and that would be the third row would be gone, which we have a whole different barn cleaning system for. And so that would really be really nice to have a few less. But really long-term goals is I would love to be able to seasonally calve in our animals and be able to graze them for, supplemented grazing, just for the terroir that you can get out of that as a cheesemaker. The sorts of flavor nuances that what those animals are eating, you're going to get a lot more flavor expressions, I think, out of a grass-fed diet or a diversified diet. That being said, it's not necessarily the most practical thing, and what I'm going to have to charge for cheese if I'm ever able to get to that point is going to be pretty outrageous. And so I'm hoping that we can justify making that switch into there too. But the beauty of them seasonally calving too would be then there's a potential that there's a month in there that you maybe don't have to milk cows. I don't know how many farmers I've talked to or how many other people that have said, it wouldn't be so bad milking cows if you only had to milk 7 days a week or, whatever it may be. And I think there's some truth to that. It'd be nice to be able to have a little break sometimes too. So as far as the processing aspect of that goes, we've been looking into what it would cost to add just the facility. The concrete alone basically blows the budget on anything we're looking to build. And what I think I've kind of honed in on is there's different mobile dairy facilities. So it's a semi-trailer that's converted into a mobile processing plant that can be pulled right onto the farm for the scale of that I'm currently thinking, in that, especially in that interim between making sure that this actually works. And we'll still be able to work with our co-op and sell milk to who we currently co-op all of our milk with. They won't miss 100 gallons of milk a week, that's for sure. Just sort of looking at how we can make that work in the middle there. And those processing units are awesome because that building cost, like I said, the building cost alone. So you can pull it right in, put it where you want it, plug it in. I mean, I know it's a lot more than just that, but at the end of the day, that would be a pretty nice solution for us, I think.
Yeah, and I didn't even know that that was a thing. Building anything these days is certainly not cheap, but I'm glad that you are looking at different options to make your dreams work, because I think it's so cool to see what women in doing our ag these days. And 2026 being the year of the women farmer, um, I love just hearing all everybody's entrepreneurial stories and coming in with a side gig and alongside being a part of the dairy, I think is so cool. So as you're been ramping up traction and gaining popularity, I mean, do you have a rough idea about how many customers you service right now, or is it probably, I'm assuming, depends on the season?
Yeah, that's a great question. Huh. I am trying to think about how many people, you know, it's pretty cool. I think our email list is, I think, over 2,000, which is pretty cool. One of the biggest things that I've been able to do over these past few years is exactly like you just said, start building that customer base so that when I'm ready to make cheese, I've got a group of people that are just as excited to get to try it. I just got to make it good enough that they want to try it again the second time. Um, but at this specific time of year, it's hard to say. Classes usually range anywhere from 6 people all the way up to 45 people. Um, and then the board sizes, they go from a little one person board to the largest spread I've done was a 350 person wedding. So all sorts of different sizes. So lots of people are getting to try different cheeses and to experience what I've put together for them and to get to try some fun different stuff too. So hard to say an exact number, but we've been growing, and the biggest goal really is to grow locally. There's a lot of people that are really good at social media and they can have followers across the whole country and across the whole world. But for me, that doesn't do anything for me in the business that I'm trying to build. And it's really those in-person connections that have been huge at that. That word of mouth networking is just huge and really is going to be one of the best assets to what I'm able to do. We're talking about the year of the woman farmer, but the other really cool thing that I've found throughout my business is just getting to connect with other local entrepreneurs. I find that they understand what I'm trying to do at a level that not everybody can. In our area, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of agritourism focus we have 3 local wineries, a brewery and a distillery all within 5 miles of our farm. And so that agritourism fits in really well, and it's been really fun to connect with those entrepreneurs. But then even in our town, we've got lots of women-owned businesses as well, and so just to get to connect with those ladies and to hear their stories and what they're doing has just been super, super cool. We got to work together to make sure, that we're kind of just working towards making it work for our own businesses, I guess. So,
Yeah, and it sounds like you've had some phenomenal mentors to watch and learn from. And I think when owning a business, getting ideas from somebody who has done it before, who's been through that process, really helps you kind of determine the things you want to do and the things that maybe they do that you don't like. And just kind of using them as like a true mentor is, I think, great. So I'm so happy that you have people to look up to, and there's probably people that look up to you. I mean, I look up to you just from what I hear from your story, you telling me your story, and going back to the farm, I think is great because it's not something that it can be a hard thing to do. So adding the
Mhm.
side business and things like that, just phenomenal. We're going to do some rapid fire questions quick before we wrap up. So my first question for you is night or morning milking? Which would you rather do?
Morning, hands down. I do my best thinking while I'm milking, and I'm nice and fresh in the morning. Usually by the end of the day, um, unless I can maybe have like a cocktail in hand or something, then night milking isn't quite so bad, is it?
And that leads me to my next question. What is your favorite wine and cheese pairing?
Ooh, that is a really good question. I was just able to go to Door County, Wisconsin, which
Oh,
is just
yeah.
a really fun peninsula, lots of cute little stops along the way. And one of our stops was there's a lot of cherry wine in Door County as well. And so one of our stops, it was a little cheese store. It was this Cheese Masters cheese store right next to a winery that made this delicious cherry wine with it's the cheese is called Marika Golden, and it's like not it's an original American original cheese. It's not a Gouda, it's not a cheddar, it's not a Swiss, it's not a Parmesan. And that pairing, I am still thinking about that pairing. I went home, talked to my distributor, ordered that cheese in, and it's one of my top selling cheeses for the last 2 months since I tried it. So that cheese and some a sweet cherry wine was really good. I'm usually not a sweet wine fan, but for some reason that worked really well. But I actually work with I work with the alcohol free bottle shop and tasting room as well. And one of the best pairings that we have found, it's a alcohol free bubbly. It's a rosé bubbly with this maple bourbon chev. Amazing, super super good too.
Wow, you're gonna have to send me these pairings because on a Friday night it sounds like something I would want to do. And it's funny you mentioned Marika Gouda because I grew up. They're like 20 minutes away from where I grew up, and phenomenal cheese, so good.
Very
So
very good.
and Door County is the best place for wine in Wisconsin. So I can only imagine the pairing. And then my last question for you, you said we're ramping up with corn silage. I'm not sure if you had said you guys are going to start next week. It's just starting to get going around here. What is your favorite harvest time snack, tractor snack?
Mm. So I don't actually end up having to do a lot of tractor work. So luckily for me, I always think we don't have the newest of tractors either, so they're not the most comfortable and not the quietest. Um, but my favorite, we'll just do my favorite farm snack. I mean, you really can't beat a cheese stick, can you? Like a cheese stick and like just like a piece of fruit or something. My nieces have been spending a lot of time out here this summer, though. They come out about once a week to help with morning chores, and they are big cheese fans. And I do have to say, I probably spoil them a little bit. My niece Brielle, she loves blue cheese, and my niece Clara loves goat cheese. And so I'll make them their own little portable charcuterie board or a little portable cheese board. And I think they would say that that is the best barn snack. But it's hard to pass up. It's hard to pass up cheese and a meat stick as a good farm snack.
Gosh, well, your nieces are spoiled because they probably get all your bougie cheese. So, well, thanks everybody for tuning in today. We were so happy to have Christine on, and she does a great job with her charcuterie boards. And if you're looking for someone to get a awesome charcuterie board, check out her website at thegreatergood.com. And she truly is a woman that does it all. So, great example of a woman farmer.
This episode is brought to you by the Hoard's Dairyman Farm Creamery. Hoard's Creamery crafts award-winning cheeses from legendary Guernsey milk at the historic Hoard's Dairyman farm. From gold medal cheddar to world-class Gouda, every bite is rich with tradition and flavor. Discover more at hoardscreamery.com. Once discovered, never forgotten. Thank you for listening to the Hoard's Dairyman podcast. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube. See you next time.